Hello everyone, you are listening to the Eiffel Tower podcast. This show, which is all about Paris and France, is brought to you by me, Oliver G, and presented by the lovely Patreon supporters of the show. They're my sponsor, the members. It's that simple. So if you want to become a member as well, it's patreon.com/the Eiffel Tower. Loads of extra benefits and you're helping make this show better. And while we're talking about this show, this one is all about jazz. But before we get into it, and before we get into even the guest, I want to just, something I've not done before, actually, is I want to dedicate this episode to the memory of Lawrence Lowe Leathers, a jazz musician I met in Paris, who we talk about a little bit in the show, but I want to tell you the story. I feel like maybe I even told it on the show 2 years ago, but very sad end to the story. He died a year ago in a domestic dispute, as I understand it. But this was a really lovely man that I met in Paris 2 years ago on the basketball court. And I told this story so many times, and I always had planned to have him on the show. Had such a lovely voice too, this guy. And I met him playing basketball, and I invited him one day out to the proper basketball courts, not the street courts where we usually play that I wrote about before in the book and I talked about a lot, out to the kind of the pro courts where I sometimes go. And we all played, and he was a really good player too, and there were a bunch of us. This is 2 years ago. And afterwards we had a beer, and we're all chatting about how we're kind of struggling along in life. I said, I'm a struggling podcaster. Someone else said they were a struggling whatever. And we're all telling the stories, and he said, I got to be honest with you guys. I don't think I'm struggling at the same level as you. We said, well, what do you do? He said, I'm a jazz musician. I'm a drummer. And I played on 2 Grammy award-winning tracks or something like that. And we're like, what? And he said, yeah. And he said, what are you doing tonight? I said, I'm not doing anything. He said, come watch me play at the Duc de Lombard. And he put me on the door. He put 4 of us on the door. And we went and it was so cool. We went and watched him that night tear it up on the drums, and he was excellent. And he was traveling from America at this point, and we said to him after the show late at night, we said, how long have you been playing with those guys? That was amazing. And he thought for a long while. He said, I've been playing with them for 4 hours now. And we all laughed, and we had a good old joke about it. I told him about my podcast, and he said, I'm having brunch with Grace Jones tomorrow. Maybe I can invite you along. He was just this kind of magical dude, and he left a real impression on me. And when I'm talking to today's guest, Alex Freiman, you'll hear the story again, his version of it. But it was through talking to Alex that I realized he died. So I just wanted to sort of honor his memory there. But this episode's dedicated to Lawrence Lowe Leathers. Amazing name as well. May he rest in peace. But as for the episode today, you're going to hear Alex Freiman, Alexandre, a Frenchman. And we sat down in the Square René Viviani, which is directly next to the Shakespeare and Company bookshop. I mean, the one that's right there. In fact, if you like your Paris trivia, you'll know perhaps that the oldest tree in the city is in that park. It's not that fantastic to look at, to be honest, this old tree, but it's in there. It just looks like an old tree. But it's right there, right next to the bookshop. And we sat there in this park, looking at the sun setting on the front facade of the Notre Dame. I just watched Alex sort of lead a live jazz show right out the front of the bookstore. And after he'd finished and packed up his stuff, he came and joined me in the park. So you're going to hear the park sounds as well. There's sirens. There's the crunch of people's feet on the Parisian gravel. You can hear probably people murmuring. I think you might be able to hear the couple that was smooching not far from us. Very Parisian scene right there. And you'll even hear the bells from Saint-Julien-le-Pauvre, I believe, the church right behind us. Now, we talked about a whole bunch of different stuff, and I'll just let you get into it, but we even talked about the Notre Dame fire, how to get into jazz music, and how Alex is bringing his music live to the streets of Paris every Saturday at the Shakespeare and Company. If you want to check out his stuff, his album is called Play It Gentle. You can get it from the Shakespeare and Company bookshop. I've linked it in the show notes, but for a little taste of it right away, The intro music is going to be something I recorded out the front of Shakespeare on Friday night, right before we started talking. So I'll leave you with that sound, and I'll be back at the end with a little news and behind the scenes. Let's do it.
We're sitting in a beautiful park. Do you remember the name of it?
No. Oh yeah, no. I would call it Saint-Julien-le-Pauvre, but it's not that because you just read it on your...
Yeah, it was like
phone.
Viviani or something.
Viviani,
that's
yeah,
right.
exactly.
So we're sitting here in a beautiful evening. You've just been playing. How are you feeling? You on like a high after?
Yeah, man, I'm happy about what happened just there because my idea of bringing the musicians on the street has been, on my mind. I was thinking about what to do during confinement to be playing music, but also, on a larger scale, how to like bring people together, because that's something I like to do, And I think music is a beautiful thing to do that. It's like one of the ways to just bring people together in a good atmosphere. I really believe in the power of music.
Did that make it difficult for you during the confinement or the lockdown when everyone was... Were you playing?
I was practicing a lot. I was thinking a lot about what will the next step be, being isolated from, somewhat, because you always have the interface of internet, but with the feelings and everything, I was somewhat isolated. I felt somewhat very isolated, which was sort of an inner travel. It was really a voyage intérieur, but it brought ideas, and I think not just to me but to a lot of people, and really one of the main ideas I had was about, like, my heart went really to the bookshop and the community in a really genuine way, because I could imagine what it would be like after the absence of foreigners coming to Paris and the problems that it would yield business-wise, and also about the musicians, myself, but also the community that is so important to me, and not playing and not making money on one hand, but with jazz musicians it's also about just playing, giving meaning to their life. And I was thinking about the bookshop a lot also, because the bookshop is a bit like the same. There's like a business aspect. It's a business, so is music, but there's a depth to it, a community, and an openness to it. And I was imagining this sort of utopian situation where you just bring the musicians with the bookshop, and then people would just be attracted because it's a nice thing.
Well, it seemed like the reaction was pretty good.
It definitely did, yeah.
Are you going to do something for Fête de la Musique?
Well, actually, no. Someone asked me to play, but then it didn't come through, and...
It's not going to be the same this year anyway, right? There'll be so fewer people.
Well, I'm not sure what will happen, but the Fête de la Musique is a bit... In Paris is a bit... There's a lot of professional and amateur musicians, and it's a bit like everyone can come out and play music, and... My idea behind coming on the street was like to make the Club de la Rue, like the Jazz Club de la Rue, to bring on, all the people that I really admire and love to play with and played with over the years, to come and connect in something that is beyond the business aspect of things, just to generate what to me is a very almost spiritual experience of playing music and creating a vibration through the instruments and the voice, and making people just, forget about their daily lives for a second and just enjoy the atmosphere.
Right. Is that what jazz is all about in a way?
To me, jazz is a complex idiom. It's like a compressed history of the modern world, I would say. Very compressed, accelerated by a lot of historical events. But to me, I was born in Paris. I studied in America. I had a long lasting love relationship with America and jazz musicians and with the music, and that's how I feel about it. It's a way of being to the world, like improvising, being a lot of time on the extremes of life, and then having to make do the rest of the time with the daily life and to not appear too remote from whatever is going on, as in saying hi to your neighbor and going to buy some bread and making some money.
Sure. What about, that's kind of interesting. Firstly, where were you born in Paris?
I was born in the 14th, but I grew up in the 16th arrondissement.
Okay. So you're a real Parisian then, as real as it gets. Okay.
That's for sure.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the history, because I know jazz goes a way back in Paris, especially with an American influence there. And I also want to talk to you about currently jazz, where there's probably a lot of people wondering where to go watch some good jazz in Paris. But how much do you know when it comes to the sort of cross history between America and Paris when it comes to jazz?
A little bit. I mean, I have to say that for some reason, and I'm not the only person to say that, definitely, is that to me, after a certain point in my life, maybe, after my teens, discovering, rock and roll and everything, and, the favorite bands like Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and everything, the great musicians as Carlos Santana and so many other, but people who really, like when you're a bit naive about music, it just hits you as being powerful. But then you go deeper and deeper, and you see the roots of all of these people. I mean, lies in the jazz, and so digging, you start to know about jazz musicians that weren't around at all. I have no idea what jazz was when I was a teenager, and when I started to discover, to kind of unravel the thread of what it was, it went deeper and deeper, and just the most at the beginning, the complex music, some things you don't really get, and people tell you that it's what you should be listening to, so you listen to it, and some things hit you really deeply, and then you dig, and then you understand that the power of what it was in the 1940s and 30s, of course, as well, and of Afro-American jazz musicians, the influence of don't get me started on this, because this is something I've been thinking about so much, and the influence on the world, and the cultural aspect, and the power of what it is, and how I think America redesigned the world in a way through also that Afro-American music. That's my really own take on it, but. And I think I forgot the initial question.
How the countries came together.
I'm a master of digression.
But no, that's all right. I like it. What about today? I think if you imagine you're talking to someone today in America or Australia who wants to come to Paris, listen to a little bit of jazz, is it hard to find? Are there places to begin?
There's a vibrant jazz scene in Paris. You've got some great venues like the Duc de Lombard and Sunset Sunside, and then these are the two clubs, and you got the Baiser Salé, which is also on the same street on Rue des Lombards, which is kind of the dead center of the city, and in a way the dead center of jazz. Then you got the New Morning, and then you got all kinds of things. So there are a lot of opportunities to listen to jazz, and then there are all these places that pop up and pop out, where jazz musicians find a gig, and then they want to have a residency. They want to find a home for whatever music they're playing. And then it's hard to tell to people where to go, because they happen over the span of maybe, if you're lucky, 1 year, 2 years.
Right.
And then something happens. The neighbors complain and so forth.
Right. But those four that you said, they're pretty standard, famous places. I think I heard Prince played in the New Morning.
Prince. Well, Prince was a funny one, My ex-girlfriend used to. She still does. Prince is her everything.
Right.
But Prince was an amazing musician. He was an amazing musician, hands down. But in the sense that he had the fame and he was dealing with all the aspects of the music industry. But then he wanted to play. So then he was like, okay, we did this gig. I'm not in his mind, so I don't know what he thought, but it seemed like that to me. Like, we played this show and we did really well and it was really organized. But now we're getting, we have a drink or something and we smoke a joint. I don't know what he did, Now we're feeling all right and now we want to play some more. But we want to play as in, like, we come in and we play with no agenda except for the fact of being out there and playing music. And that's very inspiring. And I guess to tie this in with what we're doing here, not to compare myself with Prince.
You can get away with it, why not?
I don't know.
He's not listening.
Well, I think he is. His ears were so big that he probably is from beyond the grave, but bless him. But I think like that, these experiences, listening to people, and just being interested in the way to celebrate life through music and spirituality. That's an important thing. The way people connect together is also beyond the business of trying to make a buck and appearing. We're talking about all these places in Paris which are great. It can be hit or miss. There's great musicians coming through after hours. But sometimes, it's like any job, you come on and you have to do the job, there's a date and
sure
you have to do it. But then the music just oozes beyond that, and the music is it's, to me, in my mind, it's always been like this, for all the people. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to do. It's for all the people, as many people as possible. Like, if you're playing well, and there's something strong happening, a kid, someone who's never listened to music, someone who loves jazz, someone who likes other styles and hates jazz, if you're playing well, if the band is playing well, they come on and they show up and they get a vibration through it, and that puts them in a different kind of streak. So basically, to answer your question, there's a lot of jazz musicians in Paris. If you're coming to Paris, definitely go to the after hour Duc des Lombards when it reopens, hopefully soon, because that's a great place to go, where you have a melting pot of all the people who finish their gig at midnight and then go to the Duc des Lombards.
Right.
The American musicians that are coming through town, that want to go have a drink and check out the scene.
It finishes really late there, right?
4 a.m.
4 a.m. That's beyond my bedtime. But I went and saw what we talked about before I pressed record. A mutual friend of ours, rest in peace, Lawrence Lowleathers, was there.
Oh, yeah.
And that was late.
You were tying this... it's a good moment to tie this into the conversation, because I have to say to all of you people listening to it that Oliver and I met through Shakespeare and Company, where Oliver, came to us and with his book, and because I also work as a bookseller, and his book is doing a great thing. People are really enjoying his book, and then we were thinking about the next step, and we were sitting at the cafe. It was a couple of days ago. We're talking about jazz, about Paris and everything. And Oliver told me, I met this guy who was playing basketball in Paris. And he was like, if I remember correctly, you were saying, we're all broke or something. And he's like, well, I'm not broke. I have the chance of being this Grammy nominated jazz drummer, And then I'm like, oh yeah, who is that? Because does he live in Paris? Because if he does, I must know him, because it's a small network.
Right.
And then you said, Lawrence Lowleathers. And then I was like, oh, man. And Lawrence Lowleathers was, man, he was a great, beautiful person, an amazing musician. And it happened that he moved to Paris a few years ago, and his vibe is, as a human, has connected a lot of people to it, including myself. And he was someone that, we played together quite a bit, and I really liked that guy. There was something, musically and humanly. And then we talked about the fact that he in very mysterious circumstances, he was gone about, I think, 1 year and a half ago. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, and we did this, and like the community, the jazz, actually the Duc des Lombards, we did this this great evening where it was organized by a good friend of mine who plays on my record, actually, Fred Nardin, and another friend of mine, Jérôme Portal. Beautiful people, beautiful musicians that are very active on the jazz scene today, who are kind of have a sort of a residency at the Duc des Lombards, and who played with Lawrence a lot, both of them, and who liked him a lot, and they organized this evening for him as a tribute, to his musicianship and musicality, and about 40 musicians were there that night. It lasted until 5 in the morning.
Really?
Yeah, we played some really good music, and it was beautiful.
What about I'm not an expert on jazz. I feel like it's maybe got a higher, I don't know what the word is, but an entry level to get into it. Like pop music is everywhere you hear. Rock and roll, it's at every evening, every band plays it. It feels to me that jazz maybe takes people longer to get into.
Yeah.
Why is that?
That's an interesting question. It's hard to answer that question. I think, first of all, jazz is a very complex music. I think jazz is, Duke Ellington used to call jazz American music, if I'm not mistaken. It's like American classical music. It's with jazz you've got, as I said before, a compressed history, where in classical music, you can people are, even if you're not an expert in classical music, that it starts vaguely very, 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 very early on, and then there's a whole span of music that develops, and sometimes linked to painting and to pre-war, post-war, and we got a little bit of a vision about that. Well, the jazz is a compressed way, like America has, kind of had this kind of speeded up history.
Yeah.
And jazz is that, and jazz is very complex. Like, for example, something that always baffles me is that the jazz greats, there's a lot of them, and probably a lot I'm forgetting, but if we were talking about the jazz greats, Louis Armstrong, of course, and Duke Ellington, and of course John Coltrane, Miles Davis, and so on and so forth. There's so many of them. Charles Mingus. These people were doing like a really, 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 really intricate music, and it's like if I take John Coltrane, who's all of these guys have been on my mind. My heart goes to Billie Holiday, I must say, but that's another conversation. That's another
podcast.
Yeah, that's another podcast. But if you listen to John Coltrane, I was talking to my father the other day, who's French, very learned man, about painting, literature for sure, music less so. And I was talking about John Coltrane, and I was baffled to see that he didn't know the extent of John Coltrane's music, as someone like that is one of the greatest artists of the 20th century. It's just, that's it. It's like, people talk about Jackson Pollock, and they talk about Rothko, and they talk about Picasso, and of course. But, John Coltrane is right up there. Just to compare painting and music. It's like, there's no, it's the power of a musician like this is just, I don't even have words for it. So is Duke Ellington, so is the people I've quoted before. I was just thinking about Coltrane because he was on my mind. And it's uncanny, and Thelonious Monk, of course, and it's uncanny that I feel like you walk on the street, for example, and you see people around, they go to museums, and maybe they like to buy books, and you ask them, do you know John Coltrane? So some will say yes, at least by name. But a lot of people, Thelonious Monk, people will like, who? And that is something that always baffled me, because these are the people, to go back to your question, master of digression that I am, this is the way to go into jazz, to listen to the jazz greats, like the power of what was expressed through it, which was artistic, it was aesthetic, but it was spiritual, and it was also, I suppose, I mean, at least at one point, political as well. It's a huge thing, you know. I mean, it's like, ask any musician.
The Picasso of music, Coltrane. Why is there not a Coltrane museum in the Marais?
Well, there's a Coltrane church in, I don't want to say in Connery, because I can't remember where it is exactly, but imagine that, like because Coltrane was Coltrane's like went cold turkey because he was an addict at some point, and then he decided to devote his music to curing people.
Right.
And I can tell you that his music, if you put it on and you listen to the right records, will do that to you. Like spiritually, it will curate. It will do something to you. And then followers were so in awe with the genius that he was. It was I don't know if it's in Alabama. Don't quote me on this.
Right.
I can't remember. There's this church. Imagine that. That's so funny. And there's all these priests dressed up as, you know, what you would imagine a priest like. And they're all playing saxophones. And all playing like do-dee, do-dee, which is Love Supreme. Do-dee, 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 do-dee. And they're all playing this thing like this kind of... It's just crazy to think about. But it's that powerful. It's like there's a John Coltrane church, you know, in America.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So speaking of America, there's something I want to ask you about jazz, and I have no idea how you're going to react. But I think a lot of...
Calmly, I hope so.
When it comes to jazz and American pop and pop culture, very recently this film La La Land had scenes set in Paris. I wonder, a whole lot of new jazz fans maybe have connected Paris to the music. What was the Paris jazz community reaction to that?
I mean, the guy who did La La Land, he did Whiplash, and he did this recent Netflix, I can't remember what it's called, this recent Netflix series,
right,
which I watched. I mean, honestly, to me, this person is a very talented filmmaker, and he's got his own take on whatever music he likes, but it's not... I mean, it's good because it brings people, you know, to gather around the music. So I suppose, I mean, that's definitely a great thing, rather than people not listening to any. But it's not really made. I mean, I don't know who did the music, and you know, but it's not made by a jazz musician. It's made by a very good composer. I can't remember the name.
I feel like this is a very diplomatic way of saying you didn't quite like the movie.
It's not really so much that. It's more like... It's not so much that. It's more like... When you take a notion like jazz, which is, for me, but not just for me, for the community, such an important thing, it's something you live by, and it's a way of life, and often you're a bit of an outcast in society because you love jazz, and it's a bit... People don't really know how to relate to it. 'Cause for some reason it's a complex thing, but the culture of it, it's not very known to a lot of people, which I think it should. I think it really should. I mean, you know, I may be naive, but I think like people really digging music really helps.
What if we were to end as we're running out of time and the sun's setting right onto the Notre Dame there? And I'm not making this up, folks. It's about...
No, it's true.
200 meters in front of us now.
It's beautiful.
Bathed in the beautiful... Were you here when it burned, by the way?
I was. We were right in front of the bookshop.
Oh, wow.
Showing the flames. It was surrealist.
Really?
Oh, man. It was such a surrealist scene. You know, it was right there. On a Monday, I think it was the first week of Easter.
Yeah.
And it was just like...
What happened? Were you working in the bookstore?
Yeah. One of my colleagues was like, man... come here. And I thought there was a problem with the customer, and he looked pretty pale. Really? So I thought, oh man, I'm gonna have to deal with that. And he's like, Notre Dame is burning. And I was like, what? And then we stepped out, and so everything, the smoke, the flames.
So when he said that, I assumed that the fire hadn't really gone crazy yet. It must have just started. Or? Because it burned for hours.
Yeah, I mean, when he said that, we saw the smoke and then the flames. Yeah, it took a while.
Yeah, and then that flame, like where we're standing now, the flame came up behind those big towers, sort of, and that was the most dramatic part of it all.
Yeah, actually, David, my friend, and the bookshop manager with Sylvie Whitman, actually, I called him up and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, man. It's like, we gotta close. It's like, all right, I'll be right around. And he saw the flesh,
The spire. Yeah.
the spire. Yeah, just he came. He was in such an emotional state, and he actually coming the way he was coming from. He saw it just
collapsed.
collapsed
Wow.
just right in front of his eye. And I mean, it's a huge symbol for Paris.
Yeah,
for sure.
It has been for like 1,000 years.
Yeah,
Jeez.
but it's still standing.
And it looks amazing.
It
but
does,
That,
it
but that
does.
brings me. I digressed as well. But I wanted to end on this note. Imagine there's someone, perhaps like me, who doesn't listen to a lot of jazz but would like to give it a shot. Can you give me a sort of a gateway? I was going to say gateway drug, but you know what I mean. Like
Gateway drug sounds perfect for jazz musicians.
So what's the easy way into it? How do you easy way into jazz?
Well, I'll tell you very easily. I mean, this is not just to talk about what I'm doing these days, but the gateway into jazz is to come down to places like what we're doing here at the bookshop. This is where we're trying to connect tying the music with the life picking up again, and this beautiful place like the Shakespeare and Company, that we're trying to just connect things together. Come down or check out check out what we're doing online, and if you can, come and meet the people, talk to the people, listen to the music, with people playing simply from kind of away from the business side of things, just expressing the music because that's the way of living. And then ask questions, ask about records, and and people. I mean, I'd tell you a few records, but my friends here who are packing up their instruments would tell you their own records, and then
Let's start with the easy one. What's the name of your record?
My own record.
Yeah.
Oh, it's called Play Gentle.
Play It's Gentle.
Yeah, actually.
Alex Freiman.
Yeah, that's it. It's Play Gentle. I recorded that one in 2017. I'm preparing another one, which I don't know what it's going to be called, but it's going to show a more of a feisty side of myself, which is very much in me these days, for many different reasons, fellas. And but the one I recorded, it's more of the gentle side of me, and I still listen it with a lot of pleasure, which is a difficult thing to do when you're a musician, to listen back on what you do. So I was quite happy with that fact, and people seem to enjoy it very much as well, and to get the gentle vibe about it. So.
Cool. And can people buy it online and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's available. You can. Yeah, it is. It's available through. Actually, it's available. The simplest thing is through the Shakespeare and Company website. It's up on there, but it's also available on iTunes and so forth and so on.
What they can find it in the Shakespeare and Company and buy my book while they're at it. Get the double package.
Oh yeah.
Do it. Send us in a picture. Let us know.
Yeah, we'll do a special deal.
Yeah. The jazz and literature.
Yeah.
Meeting in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, support. I mean, these are the right things to be supporting, I think, right now.
I think you're right. And on that note, I'll leave you to your evening. You got your guitar.
I do.
You got a beer.
I do.
That's the perfect way to spend the evening, right?
Well, my beer is empty, and I tell you one last anecdote is one time I played at this wedding at a friend of mine's who insisted that I played, and I said yes because a friend. I wasn't too comfortable doing a private event at a friend's wedding for different reasons, and we started playing, and his mother, class international, dressed in class international, stood before us, and she was like, I don't know anything about jazz, but one thing I know is that the glass of jazz musicians should never be empty.
That's a good way to start a Saturday night as well, I think, Alex.
For sure.
So cheers to you, and good luck with the music. And for you guys who are in Paris, come down. How long are you going to be doing this down here?
Hopefully we're going to do it throughout the season.
Great.
Every Saturday from 5 to 7 at Shakespeare and Company, in front of the Shakespeare and Company Cafe at 37 Rue de la Bûcherie. And obviously everybody welcome. All animals with either hair or feathers, all ages. And bring a friend, a spouse or mistress.
Wow, you've done this before. All right. Well, you guys have heard it. Come down to Shakespeare and Company, listen to some live music, and you might see Alex there. Thanks for being on the show.
A pleasure, Oliver.
There you go. Play It Gentle is the album of Alex Freiman. You can buy it from Shakespeare and Company. As we said, while you're at it, why not get a copy of Paris on Air, my book? I'm sure they'll post them together from the iconic bookshop Shakespeare and Company. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. On a personal note, the book at Shakespeare and Company is selling like crazy. I brought in 50 copies the other day, made a video about it, put it on YouTube. You guys should check it out. Buy a copy there. It's very... it's cool. They'll put a little stamp in there, and it feels good for me to be able to bring in a bunch of books to my favorite bookshop in Paris. So, I'll leave you on that note. If you are enjoying the Earful Tower, don't forget, become a member. Patreon.com/the Earful Tower. You'll get a bunch of extra stuff, and you'll help me make this show better. Hope to see you over there. Otherwise, I'll see you next Monday with another podcast episode. Have a lovely week wherever you are. Merci. Au revoir.